Sleep can feel like it's going well, and then suddenly it isn't. More waking, short naps, harder bedtimes, and often feels like it happens overnight. No clear reason, no obvious trigger, just a sense that everything has become more difficult. Hi, I'm Lyndsey, co-founder of the Holistic Sleep Coaching Program, where we train professionals to understand baby sleep through development, responsiveness, biology and behaviour, not rigid rules or one-size-fits-all advice. One of the most common questions we hear is, why did sleep suddenly get worse? And the answer is usually not what people expect, because sleep doesn't tend to change randomly. It changes in response to something. The first thing to understand is that sleep is not a fixed system. It's responsive, dynamic, it reflects what's happening in the body, the brain, and the environment. And when sleep changes, it's usually because something else in the system has changed, even if that change isn't immediately obvious. What makes this feel confusing is the speed of it, because often it looks like everything was fine yesterday and now it isn't. But in reality, what's happening has usually been building quietly. Small shifts in development, in awareness, sleep needs, stimulation, and then it reaches a point where sleep starts to reflect those changes more clearly. So it feels sudden, but it's rarely random. There are a few key areas where change tends to show up, and most sleep disruptions can be understood through these. Firstly, developmental change. Whenever the brain is learning something new, sleep often shifts. So that might be physical development, like rolling or moving, crawling, walking. It might be cognitive development, increased curiosity, babbling, awareness. It might be social development, more engagement, interest, interaction, communication. The brain is active, and an active brain doesn't always switch off easily, so sleep can become lighter, more fragmented, more mobile, harder to sustain, not because something's wrong, but because development is happening. Secondly, changes in sleep needs. Sleep needs don't stay the same. They change quite rapidly in the first year of life, sometimes quite subtly, and other times more noticeably. If the amount of sleep being offered no longer matches what the body needs, sleep can become broken, inconsistent, difficult to settle. We get this sense that babies are fighting sleep, and that happens because there's a mismatch between opportunity for sleep and actual need for sleep. And this is one of the most common but often overlooked reasons sleep suddenly feels harder. A typical example is that around 4 months, babies are coming out of that fourth trimester cocoon. Societal expectations of babies under 3 months are that they are snuggly and they sleep and feed a lot. Society sort of expects that babies in the fourth trimester need our help to fall asleep, and we all mostly accept that they often don't have an early bedtime. It's common for young babies to go to sleep much later. But something happens psychologically when babies come out of that fourth trimester bubble. All of a sudden, the societal pressure to get them down to bed early is high. So we might shoot for that classic 7 p.m. bedtime instead of 9 p.m. The problem is that between 3 to 5 months, sleep needs actually drop by around 2 hours in 24. They need less sleep, not more. So a classic presentation of a baby who simply needs their sleep timings adjusted is that they fall asleep at bedtime, but then wake up repeatedly in the evening and have a more fragmented night. That's because you're trying to get them to sleep more than they realistically need. Thirdly, increased awareness and stimulation. As babies grow, they become more aware of their environment, more interested, more engaged, more alert. Daytime becomes busier, there's more to take in, more to process. And that increased stimulation doesn't just disappear at bedtime. It carries through, which can show up as difficulty winding down, more unsettled evenings, more crying, and more frequent waking overnight. Finally, regulation is still developing. At the same time, the ability to regulate all of that input is still immature, and there's more happening. So there's more happening, but not yet the internal tools to manage it smoothly. And when regulation is under pressure, sleep is often the first place it shows up, and they need us more to help them to co-regulate. So this is exactly why in the previous video we talked about how so-called sleep regressions aren't actually regressions at all. They're periods where multiple changes overlap. This is the same idea, just without attaching it to a specific age. Where this becomes difficult is in how these changes are often explained, because when sleep suddenly gets worse, the natural instinct is to look for something to fix or to assume that something's gone wrong. And that's where advice can become quite rigid. Do this, change that, fix it quickly before it becomes a habit. But if the underlying reason for the change isn't understood, these adjustments can feel frustrating because they don't address necessarily what's actually driving that shift in behaviour. A more helpful question is, what has changed recently? Not just in sleep, but the bigger picture. Because when sleep changes, it's usually reflecting development, changing needs, increased stimulation, shifts in regulation, or a change in the environment. And when that's identified, support can be adjusted and targeted in a way that actually fits what's happening. Instead of trying to get back to how sleep was, it's often more effective to allow for some flexibility while things are shifting around, ensure there's enough opportunity for movement, play, interaction during the day, recognise that sleep patterns may feel less predictable for a period, and be open-minded about what this child's sleep needs actually are, and respond to increased need for support without assuming something's gone wrong, because often nothing has. Sleep's just reflecting change. So does this pass? In most cases, yes. As development settles, as the nervous system becomes more organised, as we meet those needs, sleep tends to settle alongside. Not because something was fixed per se, but because the underlying change has stabilised. So if sleep has suddenly become more difficult, it's not random, and it's not usually a sign that something has gone wrong. It's a signal that something's changed, and when that change is understood, sleep becomes much easier to interpret and respond to. If this way of understanding sleep feels clearer and less overwhelming, in the next video we'll break down one of the biggest questions that comes after this. How long do these phases actually last? Because knowing what to expect can make a huge difference in how they're experienced. See you next time.